Hi, welcome back. I've been making, if you've been following my live streams or some of my um, videos, I made a tag journal. And it's hard to really show it. It's really cool. It's just a little journal. And if you go back and look at tag journal in the live stream, you can see how to make it. And it's made from made from a hardback book and an altered book. But anyway, I made all these tags that have dangles on them, and I got a question from one of my YouTube viewers on if I would do my version of a wrapped fabric bead. I said absolutely. So I'm going to show you guys what I do. There's a lot of different ways. There's no right or wrong. You find your zen and however it works for you, but I'm going to share with you my method. So I make my fabric beads, these beautiful little fabric beads. I make the core of my fabric bead out of paper. So when I altered this book, I ended up with all of these book pages, okay? And so I make my fabric beads, the core of them. Some people use a straw, some people just wrap the fabric. I figure, like, why waste the fabric? Now you could get much more elaborate than I have with mine. This just happened to be the fabric that I had in front of me. You could, wrap fibers around it and all that stuff, but I'm just going to give you the basics of how I make a fabric bead. So the core of my fabric beads are a template like this, okay? So it's got a fat end and a thin end, but not too thin, so that when you wrap it, it ends up like, let me see if I have a couple right here, ends up like this. So can you see how the ends of the beads are a little bit, there's just like a little bit on either end? Okay, so that's how I do it. So what I do is, I just start rolling. Now you can use a tool if you want. I don't. Okay, I don't have one. Sometimes I put a toothpick or something inside of it. And I want mine fairly large. So, I mean, you can make them as long this way. So you can make them as long or as short as you want. And I'm using just used book pages, because I alter so many books. I have lots of book blocks. So I roll them until I get to about, I don't know, 1.5 inches. And then I take regular Elmer's glue. And I'm using just regular Elmer's glue. And that's what I use for the end of my bead. Nothing special, nothing fancy, just some regular Elmer's glue. And glue. Of course, my glue nozzle's clogged. That's just how Lucy rolls some days. And I do glue. I put a decent amount of glue because I want the core of my bead to be hard. Okay, and I don't even spread it around. All I do is put either fingers on both sides and try to wrap it as evenly as possible. Now it doesn't matter if it's not perfect because you're not actually going to see this bead. It doesn't matter what the text is. You could make them out of book pages. You can make them out of magazine pages. You can make them out of, the only thing you need to do is make sure that the hole is big enough for your wire to go through. Okay, that's the beginning of it. Then the next step for me is so super simple. I tear a piece of fabric. I cut one end and I just rip it. And so I have my piece of fabric, and I try to make sure that my piece of fabric is going to be as wide, if not just a little tiny bit wider than the end of my bead. And you want to I like it frayed. You can do it any way you want. And I once again take my Elmer's glue and I start rolling it, and I just roll it around enough to cover the bead. I don't add extra. But if you feel like you want to add extra, go ahead. I just cover exactly the piece of paper, just a little bit more than that. Now, this is a great way if you guys have things that your kids have outgrown, things that clothing that you're going to let go of. Instead of putting it in a landfill, make yourself some fabric strips and make yourself some beads. Okay, now that's what I do. This is it. Now, the next step for me would be, I do take a little glue, and generally I have a coffee lid that I put my glue in, and I'll show you why. I put a little glue in it. And so what I do then is I dip the end of my bead in the glue, both ends. And see where that fraying bits are? I pull them to a cone. I leave the fray part, but I pull them. That's why it's good to have just a little bit more than you need. Okay, you want to let it dry. Now I have one right here that I've done. Now I've done this the same way. It was done exactly the same way. Now I'm going to cut my piece of wire, and I put 2 little seed beads on either end to be like a bead cap. Okay. Now I'm going to do the pigtailing, and I showed you wire wrapping. I showed you in another video how to do that. So I'm going to start on one end. I'm going to just bend that end up so it doesn't fall off. I'm going to start on one end, pull my, and I'm going to wire wrap. I'm just going to wrap around and around and around until I end my wire. Now what's kind of fun is that you can get as messy or as neat as you want with this. I think it looks better if it's messier, if it's more rustic looking, if it's less uniformed, but you can do it any way you'd like. So there I have one end like this. Now this one is substantially longer, and that's awesome. You want to keep it that way. Now here is what I do with this. Do the same thing. Now I'm going to bring it closer to the bead part, closer to the end, and do the wrapping. And just like wrap it twice, and then I'm going to take my piece of wire and I'm going to wrap it around the top of my bead. And sometimes, I mean, if you leave it really long, you'll have more, and I'll show you one like that. And then what I do is I actually go ahead and coil it up to make like a decorative coil. Okay? And you do want to make sure that you pull it around and smash it down flat, because you don't want it to catch on anything, especially if you are you know, hanging it. You just don't want it to catch on your clothing. Okay? So now you can see some various ones that I've done right here that are like that. Now let me just show you one. Let me do this one. Let me find, here's some beads right here. This is a great way to use up all of your little tiny fabric scraps and beads and stuff that you have that maybe you don't like the color of them. Maybe they're just not, you know, for whatever reason, maybe it's just not perfect, or, you know, I don't know, I have all kinds of beads. I was a jeweler for a long time, so I have all kinds of odd beads. Okay, so I have 2 beads there. You can add as many as you want. You could add stones on the end of them. It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to just cut myself a long piece of wire. Here, I'll use this one. This one already has one at the end. I was doing a demonstration for a previous video of how to do wire wrapping. So this already has one end wire wrapped, and I'm going to stick my bead in. And then it doesn't matter if it covers it up a little, because you can add more as you go along. And then the bead that I have here was like a half bead. It was broken. Okay, so let me just show you. Glue on me. Okay, so I'm going to take it out, hold the eye of my bead, and I'm going to wrap it around a couple of times above the seed bead. Okay, now this one's a lot longer, so I'm going to take it down and I'm going to wrap it around the whole bead until I get to the end. Okay, now then the next step would be you could take the same gauge wire if you want, but I also have a thinner gauge wire, which I think looks really good. And you can start wrapping your bead. Now if you're going to add other beads to it, I would suggest you start wrapping at the top of one of your, at the end of one of your beads. Just wrap around, and I'm going to make this one like much more rustic, much more boho style. So I started there. I've got this long piece of ribbon, and now you can use a long piece of wire. Sorry guys, my head can't think. Long piece of wire, and now I'm going to just go through and I'm going to start picking up little seed beads, and you can use your wire as like a needle, and you just start picking up your beads string as many of them as you want on there now, and then I'll show you. It's so super simple, so fun, so easy. Okay, so I just have a few. I have like 4 or 5 beads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring it down and then just wrap, and then just add the bead, push the bead down and wrap. And you can do it in a haphazard way. You can do it any way you like. So easy, so fun. Keep going until you get to the end, and then go back and then head back the other direction. You know, head back and wrap around. Now I need a few more beads. This is such a fun way to use like all of those extra excess little beads, odd beads, and you don't have to just use seed beads. You can use any kind of beads, actually. You know, whatever you feel like you want to add to your bead. Now, if you were going to add fibers, I would add the fibers before I would do the wire wrapping. Okay, before you did this step of wire wrapping. And just keep going and wrap around, you know, and keep going until you've decided, okay, my bead's wrapped enough. You know, I like the way it is. I'm just doing plain wire right now. Now, if you were going to add your fibers, they would be caught and captured in this, right? Now I'm just going to go ahead and end it, and I'm going to end it back down on the other end of the bead where I don't have as much. And then I'm going to snip off the excess. You want to go back and take your pliers to make sure all of your ends are tucked in. You don't want to leave any of your ends not tucked in, because that will definitely catch on your work. So here are the steps of making fabric beads. So I hope you like my little quick tutorial. And as always, from my heart to your heart, I'm sending you so much aloha. Take care till next time. Bye.